Welcome, gentle dreamer, to a slower world tucked in snow and soot, where time creaks softly through the beams of an old timber roof and frost patterns bloom on glassless windows. Tonight, we will drift back to a northern village deep in the medieval countryside, where the year folds itself inward as winter arrives, and daily life becomes a rhythm of warmth, patience, and small, steady comforts. Let the hush of falling snow settle in your thoughts as we slip quietly into the wool-wrapped routines of villagers who lived by firelight and instinct, close to the land and closer still to one another. It begins at the edge of the forest, just after the last leaves have fallen and the branches stand bare, black lines against a sky the colour of pewter. The village is a cluster of low-roofed cottages, their thatch pressed thick with snow, chimneys whispering thin ribbons of smoke into the still air. The wind moves gently, carrying the scent of peat and frozen earth. The ground crunches faintly under worn boots as a figure makes his way toward the woodpile, wrapped in layers of homespun wool, patched leather and coarse linen. His breath curls in soft clouds as he stoops to lift a heavy log, its bark rough and rimmed with ice. Inside the house, the hearth crackles steadily. The firebank built from coals saved overnight, coaxed back to life with patience and straw. The heat rises slowly, filling the low room with a gentle warmth that doesn't quite reach the corners. The walls are thick with wattle and daub, whitewashed but uneven, and the small glassless window is stuffed with oiled cloth and thin animal hide to keep the drafts at bay. A woman stirs a pot hanging over the flames, her wooden spoon turning through a thin broth of root vegetables and dried herbs, the scent earthy and familiar. She hums quietly, a tune as old as the village, while children bundled in cloaks made from old cloaks sit cross-legged nearby, pressing their hands to the warm stones at the hearth's edge. The room is dim, lit only by fire and a single tallow candle that gutters in a corner, its wax pooled on a flat stone. Outside, the snow continues to fall, slow and endless, softening every edge, piling high against doors and walls. The animals huddle in their own warm places, a cow in the byre, its breath steaming, a few chickens roosting above the straw, a pig lying curled like a great breathing stone. They are fed in silence, a ladle of mash here, a scattering of grain there, hands moving gently, soothingly through the daily ritual. Water is melted from ice in iron kettles, and clothing is dried by the fire, steaming faintly, smelling of wood smoke and lanolin. Daylight is short and the work is slow. Spinning wool by hand, mending cloaks with bone needles, twisting rushes into rope, patching thatch where the snow has crept through. Each task is done with a quiet patience, the body kept in motion, the mind adrift in the rhythm. Conversation is soft, murmured over chores, or not at all. When the wind rises outside, shaking the shutters and hissing beneath the door, the villagers press closer to the fire, listening with stillness, wrapped in furs and silence. At night, they sleep in shifts or all together, wrapped in cloaks and blankets layered thickly, children nestled between parents, warmth shared like bread. The fire is banked again, carefully buried in ash so it lives until morning, and a faint glow pulses in the darkness like a slow, sleeping heart. Time slips gently, unhurried and unremarkable, one day to the next, marked only by the return of snow, the creak of beams in the cold, the taste of turnips in broth. There are no clocks, no calendars, only instinct and routine. The village survives not with drama, but with diligence, not with struggle, but with softness. 100 quiet actions repeated until the frost retreats. Outside, the snow continues to fall, and inside, by the fire's golden breath, the village endures. The sun rises late and low, barely lifting above the treetops, its pale light casting long blue-grey shadows across the hard-packed snow. The village wakes slowly, stirred not by bells or clocks, but by habit and hunger. Smoke trails curl upward from each hearth, softening the outline of rooftops with their grey breath. Inside one of the cottages, the fire is nudged gently awake, the coals stirred with care until they glow again, and a fresh log is set atop the embers with quiet hope. The woman of the house moves through the dim room, her feet wrapped in thick wool rags tied with strips of leather, her shawl tucked snug around her shoulders. She kneels beside the hearth, her hands moving automatically, feeding the flames, watching for the moment the orange tongues catch and rise. The room is cold still, though the walls are thick and the door is barred against the wind. She hears the shift of her husband's boots across the packed earthen floor, the rustle of the blanket as he folds it and tucks it back onto the bench, always the same motions in the same order. The children are slower to stir, curled like cats beneath a sheepskin, their breath warm and even. The woman takes a small bundle from a shelf above the fire, dried herbs wrapped in cloth tied with twine, and shakes a few into the morning's water, scenting it faintly with mint and nettle as it begins to steam. Outside, the snow crunches under the boots of men walking to the edge of the village, heading toward the forest's edge to check the traps they laid before the last storm. The forest is quiet, muffled under a heavy blanket of snow, each step leaving a deep, clear print. Rabbits and birds are scarce now, cleverer in winter, but sometimes a small prize waits, stiff with cold, caught in the wire or beneath the woven netting. The men work without speaking, their breath misting around their faces, fingers numb even through their mitts. They bring back what they can, a rabbit perhaps, or a half-rotted stump for firewood, and return before the snow picks up again. Back in the village, a spinning wheel turns in slow rhythm. A woman's hands guide the wool through, twisting it into thread, her foot pressing steadily on the pedal. The wool was sheared in spring and washed in the summer stream, now dried and waiting its turn beside the fire. A small girl winds the spun thread onto a reel, her fingers quick, her face red from the warmth. Beside them, another sits darning a hole in a sock, her needle moving in tidy stitches across the fraying wool. The day stretches in this quiet way, the house filled with the whisper of spinning, the pop of the fire, the occasional murmur between those too used to silence to speak more than needed. In the corner, the meal pot simmers again, another slow stew made from barley and roots, thickened with scraps of last week's salted meat. Food is measured carefully, rationed without fuss. No one is surprised by hunger here. It is just another kind of weather. Outside, a dog barks once, then falls quiet again. Snowflakes begin to fall again, large and slow, settling gently on everything, erasing footprints, smoothing rooftops, building once more upon the fences and beams. The men mend their tools by lantern light, an axe handle that's begun to split, a latch with a broken pin. Their fingers are thick and clumsy with cold, but the work is slow and simple, and they know each motion by heart. Children help where they can, fetching twine or passing nails, rewarded with the warmth of praise and a little honeyed bread saved from summer stores. As the light fades again and the sky grows bruised with twilight, the village settles in once more. Animals are checked, doors are barred, the last logs of the day are laid into the hearth. The room grows golden again, flickering softly against the soot-dark walls, and everyone draws nearer to the heat. The fire crackles, and the sound of someone humming drifts up from the corner, the tune slow and low, and very old. One by one, they slip into sleep, wrapped in wool and quiet, their dreams shaped by snow and smoke, and the memory of green seasons waiting beyond the cold. Morning comes again as a quiet grey, not so much a sunrise as a gradual softening of shadows along the frost-bitten beams of the low cottages. The cold is deeper now, settled into every joint and crevice, biting at fingers before the fire is rekindled. The coals are coaxed once more from their ash, and a thin flicker of warmth returns to the hearth. A few wisps of breath still curl in the air as cloaks are shrugged on, and wooden shoes are slipped over thick-wrapped feet. In one house, a woman carefully unhangs the sack of flour from the rafter beam, where it has hung above the reach of mice, the linen dusted with pale powder, tied with twine. She moves with patience, scooping from the sack a modest handful into the basin, mixing it with cold well water, a pinch of salt, and the remains of yesterday's sour leaven. Her hands knead slowly, firmly, the dough pushing back against her knuckles, soft and elastic beneath her palms. It is left to rise near the fire, wrapped in cloth, while she scrubs the baking stone clean with a stiff brush and sets it on a metal hook near the flame to warm. The kitchen is a place of low light and thick smells: old wood smoke, wet wool, yeast, dried herbs bundled overhead. A child hovers nearby, nose pink with cold, eyes following each motion in hopes of a crusty end piece. In another cottage, a man sits at a narrow bench, carving strips of horn into buttons and toggles, the shavings falling into a small pile at his feet. His knife is bone-handled and often sharpened, its edge gleaming. Nearby sits a girl threading wool through a wooden loom, her hands steady and practiced. The cloth will be rough but warm, woven for layering, dyed with onion skins or woad in the warmer months. Colours faded now, but still soft. The candle on the table burns low and thick, its flame tilted slightly in the draught. Tallow has a strong scent, heavy and waxy, but light is precious in these dim days. The village has no true market in winter, but small exchanges happen in low voices across doorways. A pot of sour milk is traded for a bone needle. A twist of linen thread is given in return for a single smoked fish. These moments of barter are soft and neighbourly, settled more by trust than value. No coin changes hands, not in this season. Outside, snow begins again, not heavily, but steadily, in the way that promises a long afternoon of silence. The roofs are nearly lost in white now, their edges soft, icicles long and glassy at every eave. Men trudge carefully toward the well, dragging sledges laden with barrels. Water must be broken through ice, drawn with heavy rope, the wooden bucket creaking as it's hauled up through the chill. Spilled drops freeze instantly on the rim. Children play for a while at rolling snow into balls until their fingers grow red and numb. Then they retreat, breathless, to the fire's edge once more. Their games are simple: guessing games, rhythm claps, stone circles scratched into the dirt floor, and their laughter, though brief, is a balm. Inside one home, an elder woman sits on a three-legged stool beside the hearth, mending a woolen cap with a curved needle. Her eyes are pale and her fingers bent, but the stitch is steady, passed down through hands older than hers. She hums under her breath, though no one listens now, just a habit of rhythm while her thread pulls through the weave. Overhead, the rafters are hung with bundles of dried fish, garlic braids, and a few curls of last year's herbs, bay, thyme, a little sage. A cat sleeps curled on a flat stone near the warmest part of the fire, its tail tucked beneath its chin, ears flicking only when logs are added. By early evening, the light is gone again. A faint blue glows from beyond the cloth-stuffed windows, but inside it is already full night. The bread is baked, the crust cracked and warm, the smell filling every inch of the small space. Bowls are filled with porridge and broth, with thin slices of salted meat or bits of root mash. The meal is quiet but filling, eaten from wood or clay. Spoons pass between hands, thanks mumbled or simply felt. Afterward, tools are cleaned and placed back where they belong. The fire is fed one last time. The candle is snuffed. Sleep comes gently, one breath at a time, under low ceilings and the hush of snow above. The cold deepens as the days grow shorter still, and now the village settles more fully into the habits of survival that have guided its winters for generations. Every step is slower, every action deliberate, not from weariness but from a well-learned rhythm, the pace of those who have no need to rush, for rushing wastes breath and burns energy better kept close. The hearth is now the heart of each home, its stones blackened by smoke, its base warm and flickering with constant flame or coal. Even before the cock crows, the fire is checked, stoked, coaxed, its warmth drawn back from slumber with careful hands. The ashes are stirred and sifted, looking for the still living glow buried beneath last night's blanket of white-grey dust. Fingers, stiff from sleep, move gently, holding twigs and straw, just so, waiting patiently for the faintest orange glimmer to flare. Once lit, the fire spreads slowly to new wood, and its crackle becomes the soft music of the morning. The first light of dawn is often missed, veiled behind heavy clouds and fog. The sky remains pale and sour and low, and only the changing cold air signals the shift from night to day. Within one of the cottages, a man crouches beside a round wooden tub, his sleeves rolled high as he dunks linen into near-scalding water, his hands red and steaming in the chill. He scrubs shirts against a ribbed washboard, his breath steady, lips pressed into a line. The soap is made from old lard and lye, rough and sharply scented, but it cleans well, and the water grows grey and cloudy as the fabric is worked and rinsed. The clothing is then wrung tight and draped on ropes near the fire, where it will steam and drip for hours before finally growing stiff and dry. Another home is filled with the gentle rhythm of weaving. A loom made of thick, dark timber dominates the corner, and a young woman passes the shuttle back and forth through the taut threads, her eyes watching each row settle into place. The wool is coarse but strong, dyed in autumn with onion skins, walnut husks, or rust-coloured clay. She has made this fabric for cloaks, for tunics, for covers, and even now her mind moves forward, thinking of the days still to come, the cold still to arrive, the mouths still to feed. Nearby, a boy shapes clay with chilly fingers, smoothing it into the form of a small bowl, his thumb pressing the centre down just as he had been taught. These vessels, once dried by the hearth and fired in the communal kiln, will be used to hold broth or butter, sometimes honey if it can be spared, each one slightly different, each one touched by the warmth of careful hands. In the village common house, a gathering of neighbours leans close over a table scattered with wooden pegs and strips of dried leather. They are mending shoes, reattaching worn soles, trimming the edges smooth. A pot of glue made from boiled hooves simmers nearby, thick and tacky, giving off a sour-sweet scent. One man sharpens an awl by candlelight. turning it slowly on a whetstone, while another stitches fur into the lining of a boot, his stitches tight and even. These shoes will be worn until they fall apart and then made new again and again. For there is little waste here, only use, repair, and use again. As the sky begins to dim, the village prepares for night once more. The goats are given the last of the hay, the chickens checked in their roosts, and the barn door pulled shut with a low groan. The snow is deeper now, a soft wall against the base of each cottage, and the air carries a sharp stillness, the kind that makes sound feel heavier and time feel slower. Inside, a woman ladles thick bean stew into wooden bowls, her arms steady, her hands wrapped in cloth to hold the hot pot. Bread is broken between fingers, dipped and chewed in thoughtful silence. The children eat with sleepy eyes, their heads resting against shoulders, their knees pulled up beneath them. After the meal, a story is told, not loudly, not grandly, just a gentle retelling of something old and familiar, a tale of a fox in winter, or a clever girl with a lantern. The firelight flickers on the storyteller's face, and the children listen with half-closed eyes, already drifting, their limbs heavy with warmth. Outside, the snow continues to fall, piling slowly, gently, upon the rooftops, the fences, the quiet well, and within the walls of each small home, wrapped in wool and time and quiet, the village breathes together, safe in the slow heart of winter. There is a rhythm now that no one questions, a cadence that moves beneath the silence like a heartbeat, slow and steady, set by frost and fire and the ancient tick of the seasons. In the village, each day unfolds almost exactly as the last, and that sameness is a comfort, not a burden. People rise before the light, warmed more by routine than fire at first, shrugging on layers that have hung near the hearth overnight, still faintly warm and tinged with the soft scent of smoke. The walls, though thick, carry the cold in their bones, and fingers must move quickly to chase the numbness away. The children are often the last to stir, curling deeper into sheepskins or cloaks, their breath puffing above them in small clouds as they whisper about dreams or nothing at all. The eldest in each household move first, tending embers, unbarring the doors, lifting the lid on the small stores of food. A thin porridge is prepared with water and grain, stirred slowly, thickened only by time, and perhaps a sliver of dried apple or a spoon of honey if the day is generous. Eating is quiet work, and bowls are wiped clean with fingers or crusts of yesterday's bread. Nothing wasted. As light seeps in through the hide-covered window gaps, the work of survival resumes. It is not harsh, this labour, only constant. The villagers mend their world with small acts, patching seams, splitting logs, brushing snow from thatch so it doesn't sag or rot beneath the weight. The sound of chopping echoes now and then across the snow-covered lanes, a slow thunk followed by the hiss of breath, the shuffle of boots repositioned in drifts. Wood is gathered, split again, and stacked by the door in careful piles, always enough for one more night, never quite enough for comfort. The women gather near the warmth, sitting in half circles, sewing, spinning, cracking dried beans between stones. Their talk is low and sparse, words shared mostly when needed, though sometimes a soft laugh slips through, quickly swallowed by the room's hush. Children help where they can, fetching buckets of snow to melt, sorting lentils by hand, collecting wool tufts from the floor to spin into stuffing for cloaks or cushions. The smallest things matter most in winter. No act too minor, no effort wasted. In one house, A man applies wax to the seams of a leather pouch, pressing it in with a bone tool to waterproof the stitch. In another, a woman braids dried rushes into mats to line the floors, her hands moving with such quiet purpose that even the candle beside her seems to flicker in time. Though the village is still, there is never stillness in the bodies of its people. Even rest comes as a kind of motion, scraping, folding, stirring, feeding, always preparing for the next need. The animals, too, are tended in silence. They are kept close to the homes when possible, their warmth a welcome addition, their breath mingling with the human one. The cows are slow and drowsy, the goats nibble at dry bramble, the hens rustle faintly in the straw, their clucks muffled and content. Sometimes a ewe births early, and the soft bleating of a lamb fills the barn with new sound, a reminder that even in the depths of snow, life continues its quiet insistence. As the sun arcs across the pale sky, its light barely touches the tops of the trees, and by mid-afternoon, long shadows begin to stretch once more across the village paths. Children play briefly before dusk, chasing one another with sticks or making hollow snow caves near the walls, their laughter like bells in the hush. They're called in with quiet voices, beckoned by the glow of firelight spilling from doorways and the promise of warmth. Supper is modest again. Leftover stew, perhaps thickened with oats, or roasted parsnips pulled from the root cellar. Spoons clink against wood, bread is torn by hand, and hands are warmed on the sides of bowls. After the meal, wool is wound, tools are counted and set aside, and the fire is readied for the long night ahead. Candles are spared when possible, and often only the hearthlight guides the last of the evening's work. Stories may be shared again, but they are whispered like prayers, told not to entertain, but to remember, to pass the slow time with meaning. Someone sings a tune so soft it almost disappears beneath the crackling of the fire, and others hum along without thinking. Eventually the house grows quiet. The embers are tucked in. The shutters are secured. Outside, the snow falls again in steady flakes, and inside, beneath fur and linen and the faint scent of ash and wool, the village sleeps in the deep, deep, patient peace of winter. Beneath the frozen crust of the village lies its quiet hoard, the stored patience of warmer months, a season's worth of cautious planning, now buried under frost and packed into cellars dug deep into the hillside, or below the thick clay floors of the homes themselves. These root cellars and stone-piled storerooms, sealed tight with straw and boards, hold more than vegetables. They hold the memory of summer, the scent of dirt warmed by sun, the feel of harvest under tired hands. On days when the snow falls too thick for work outdoors, and the air seems to hold its breath in stillness, the villagers descend into these underground places with a lantern in hand, their boots echoing on steps worn smooth by use. The air down there is always damp and cool, even colder now, and carries the earthy tang of turnip, onion, and the faint sweetness of wrinkled apples wrapped in straw. A woman crouches low beneath the ceiling, her breath steaming as she lifts a stone lid from a clay jar, peering in to inspect pickled beans steeped in sour brine, nodding to herself as she counts what's left. In the shadows behind her, old baskets hold carrots packed in sand, soft-skinned and small, yet firm still, and bundles of dried herbs dangle from beams above, their leaves curled like paper, their scents dulled with time. There are salted meats hanging too, the fat hardened and white around the edges, tied in cloth, each piece marked with a charcoal X to count the weeks gone. Beside them are sacks of barley, oats and peas, kept dry in tightly woven flax, their contents scooped out in handfuls, never wasted. Nothing here is for indulgence. Everything is portioned, guarded with quiet math. What is taken today must mean something for tomorrow. As the woman climbs back up into the home, her arms full with a clay pot, a twist of dried sage, and a single onion, her eyes take a moment to adjust to the warm amber of the hearth glow. She sets her finds down gently and begins the evening meal without announcement, peeling the onion with a small worn blade, her fingers moving slowly, not from hesitation, but from deep familiarity. Elsewhere in the village, another family does the same, bringing up parsnips and a clutch of spotted eggs wrapped in straw and cloth, laying them out on the board with reverence. The eggs are a rare luxury now, laid only by the most stubborn hens or those fooled by the shelter's warmth. They are prized and cracked carefully into bowls as if they might vanish with a careless move. A broth is made, thin but steaming, seasoned with vinegar or a pinch of last year's salt. Bread is sliced thin, dipped into the pot to soften, and children are told, gently, to chew slowly. Above ground, the wind swirls through the village, tugging at shutters, brushing over chimney tops, setting the trees to groan and sway. Dogs lie curled near the doors, their ears flicking now and then at the sound of snow slipping from a roof or a crow landing on the fence post. The sky is a cold slate above, and the path between homes is now so packed with snow that it creaks beneath every step. Still, the villagers venture out when needed, one to check the chickens for frozen combs, another to haul in more wood, a third to carry hot embers in a metal pan to an elder's hearth 2 doors down. These visits are quiet and wordless, more about presence than conversation, the simple shared warmth of knowing someone still stirs beyond your own door. In the churchyard, its steeple just visible through the drifting white, candles flicker through thick windows, left burning for saints and seasons alike. No great gatherings occur in winter, no loud festivals or processions. Instead, prayers are muttered over loaves and smouldering fires, and blessings are carved in chalk above door frames when the new year threatens to begin beneath ice. As darkness folds itself once more over the land, the village lights are few but steady. A flicker in one home, another across the lane, and between them nothing but snow and quiet. In these long months, the people grow inward like roots, drawing close to their centre, to the warmth of memory, the safety of repetition, the weight of blankets and fire and bread. Nothing moves quickly, and nothing needs to. Sleep comes early, and the hush that follows it settles like snowfall on rooftops and fields, softening the sharpness of cold and time alike. As winter deepens, the days begin to fold in upon themselves like old parchment, each one marked not by events, but by sensations, the crackle of fire, the heaviness of wool, the low groan of trees as they sway under snow. Time passes slowly, measured in quiet intervals between small chores and long hours by the hearth, and in this hush, the mind reaches naturally toward memory and story. With the light gone early and the air thick with silence, voices begin to stir again in the evening, not in command or labour, but in the softer tones of remembrance, of tales carried through generations, like embers passed hand to hand. In one cottage, a family gathers close to the fire, their stools drawn in, their hands busy with mending or spinning, and the eldest among them clears her throat softly, a signal more than a sound, and begins to speak. The tale is one the children have heard many times before, about a fox who tricked a hunter and a crow who spoke in riddles. But still they listen with rapt attention, their eyes reflecting the flicker of flame, their bodies still. Her voice rises and falls with the rhythm of the telling, not loud but rich, like the slow stirring of a thick broth, each word wrapped in warmth. In another home, a man speaks of a king whose castle vanished under snow, whose treasure lies still beneath a frozen lake. And as he speaks, his wife works the comb through a skein of wool, her fingers never pausing. No one asks if these stories are true. Truth is not their purpose. They are not escape, but shelter, a way of bringing the past near to the present, of keeping the darkness at bay, not with fire, but with familiarity. Outside, the snow falls again in a fine, endless dust, so light it seems not to touch the ground, but to hover there, suspended, whispering across the rooftops. The trees bend slightly beneath the new weight, their branches creaking with a sound like old doors. A fox passes near the edge of the village, unseen but sensed, its paws making no sound on the drift. The chickens murmur in their sleep, the goats shift in their stalls, and the wind gathers once more against the corners of the cottages, testing the seams for any gap it can slip through. But inside, the smoke rises steadily, pulled through narrow chimneys into the sky, its scent clinging to every surface. The air is thick with it. Smoke from oak and birch, from peat and dung, from straw when the wood runs low. Clothes, skin, hair, all carry the smell, so that warmth is not only felt but worn. And within that smoky haze, life goes on in its gentle circling way. A boy carves a spoon from a scrap of alder, his knife slow and careful, the wood smooth and pale under his thumb. A girl sorts dried beans into piles by colour, pausing only to warm her fingers over the coals. A mother rewinds spun thread into tight skeins, laying them flat in a basket beside her. Even these quiet acts become part of the evening's rhythm, small harmonies in a larger song. The fire dims, then is fed, then dims again, and each time it brightens, shadows leap across the walls, stretching tall and thin like the trees outside. The shadows of those present flicker too, the outline of a head bowed over work, the curve of a back, the flutter of fingers threading a needle. They move without noise, without thought, part of the scenery of survival. Occasionally a cough breaks the silence, dry and sharp, then fades again. A kettle hums on the edge of the hearth, water warming for a poultice or a sip before sleep. When the stories end, there is no applause, only a slow return to quiet, a shared stillness that needs no explanation. Blankets are drawn closer, a candle is pinched out, the fire is stirred one last time, its coals arranged like a bed, its breath buried beneath ash until morning. One by one they lie down, knees curled, backs to the cold wall, faces to the fire. And outside, the world remains wrapped in snow and night, and the gentle memory of stories told in smoke and silence. By midwinter, when the snow is high enough to blanket fences and the sky remains pale and indifferent even at noon, the people of the village begin to lean more heavily into their quiet rituals of belief, not in grand ceremonies or loud proclamations, but in the soft gestures that have woven their way into daily life as firmly as any stitch or prayer. The chapel, at the village edge, stands stoic beneath a sagging roof of snow, its stone walls streaked with damp and soot, its bell long silent, wrapped against the ice in a swaddle of wool to keep it from cracking when struck. Inside, the air is colder than outside, the walls damp to the touch, the narrow benches lined with fir and moss where the villagers sit, not for sermons or pageantry, but for stillness. Here, even in silence, faith has shape. An old woman arrives first, her shawl heavy with frost, and she kneels at the altar with a slow grace, her knees stiff but practiced, her hands folded over one another as if warming each other in prayer. Others follow, one by one, leaving no footprints on the stone floor, but brushing past each other with the faintest nods. There are no hymns, only breath and memory, and the subtle shifting of light through oiled parchment windows. Outside, children are sent to gather twigs fallen from the trees, brittle branches splintered by wind and heavy snow, brought back by the armful and laid near the hearth to dry. These are not grand pieces of firewood, but they catch flame easily and are cherished for their quick heat. In one home, a mother traces a simple cross above the doorway with a dab of soot from the hearth, her thumb slow and deliberate, while her youngest watches with wide, solemn eyes. She says nothing, and the gesture passes without explanation, as most things do. In another house, tucked close to the barn, where animals breathe thick clouds into the straw, a man sharpens his blade with careful strokes, not for hunting or battle, but for the quiet task of shaping a wooden ladle, a gift for his brother's household, carved with a spiral for protection and grace. These objects, like blessings, are both useful and symbolic, shaped from necessity and meaning in equal measure. The long nights are darker now, not because the sun has changed, but because the weariness has settled deeper into bones and thought alike. Sleep comes more quickly, but the dreams grow longer, stranger, stitched with images of warmth and green things, of rivers running and meadows breathing beneath open skies. In this season, the soul wanders. To guide it gently home again, charms are tucked into folds of linen, a dried flower from midsummer, a stone found at harvest, a scrap of red thread looped around a child's wrist. These are small things, not spoken of aloud, but passed along from mother to daughter, neighbour to neighbour, as one might pass a cup of broth or a freshly patched glove. Inside the homes, the flames in the hearths are kept just strong enough to hold back the worst of the chill, and sometimes a bit of cider, fermented in the dark months and stored in tightly sealed earthenware, is warmed in a pot and passed around in silence, each person taking a sip for luck, for health, for warmth. The drink is sharp and smoky, and it leaves a gentle burn behind the tongue, a flicker of brightness amid the grey. The animals are sometimes blessed too, a handful of grain scattered in a circle before the coop, or a whispered word spoken as a hand brushes the neck of a cow too old to bear another calf. These things matter because they remind the villagers of the world's rhythm, of how even in the stillness, something unseen continues to turn. On the coldest nights, when frost etches silver veins across every beam and bucket, and the stars blink with bitter clarity above the trees, the village feels like a single body, each home a heartbeat, each fire a breath, and between them, a thread of belief holds everything together. Not loud, not boastful, but steady as wool stretched on a frame, steady as prayer spoken through cracked lips, steady as the wind outside whispering across the frozen earth. As the long winter weeks stretch onward, the villagers turn more often to their quiet knowledge of herbs and homemade remedies. The old wisdom passed through whispered instructions and careful watching, not written in books, but remembered through need. Illness, like the cold, is not a sudden guest in these months, but a familiar presence woven gently into the rhythm of life. Coughs echo in the still air, not with panic but with persistence, and are met not with alarm but with warm cloths, simmering pots, and steady hands. In one cottage, a woman leans over the hearth, her sleeves rolled above her elbows, stirring a small pot, in which a handful of dried elderberries and a sliver of licorice root steep in water darkened with honey and thyme. The scent is sharp but comforting, sweet and resinous, and she watches it bubble with a practiced eye, adjusting the fire with a poker wrapped in cloth to keep her fingers from burning. Beside her, a child wrapped in 3 layers of woolen tunics breathes through parted lips, eyes glassy but calm, head resting on a cushion filled with straw and dried rosemary. The air is thick with the warmth of steam and smoke, a blanket of scent and sound, and the room holds its breath with them. A rag soaked in vinegar is hung near the door to clear the air, and a dish of cloves and garlic rest by the window, not because they cure, but because they comfort. Across the village, another home does much the same. A man chews slowly on a curl of dried licorice, while his wife grinds mustard seed into a paste, mixing it with oil and wrapping it in cloth to place on his chest. The mustard stings slightly, and he winces, but she knows how long to leave it, and how to speak gently while she waits. Remedies here are quiet things, mullein leaf steeped for sore throats, yarrow laid in bruises, horehound for the lungs, all tucked into little bundles tied with frayed twine and labelled in no language but memory. The women keep them in baskets near the hearth, in bags hung from the rafters, or in small clay pots sealed with wax and care. They are not cures, not in the way the world might one day come to know cures, but they are soothing. And in the stillness of winter, soothing is its own kind of medicine. Sometimes the village healer is called, not a physician, not in any formal sense, but an older woman with a crooked back and a deep knowledge of plants, whose touch is cool and sure, who smells always faintly of earth and smoke. She comes quietly, never asked aloud, only signalled with a knock at her door and a glance that speaks of fever or swelling, or a child who won't wake. She brings with her bundles of dried mint, small jars of goose fat, carved wooden spoons with worn, smooth edges, and she does not speak unless spoken to. Her presence is enough. In one house, she checks the tongue of a man who has not eaten in 3 days, nods once, and makes a tea from angelica root that he drinks without question. In another, she lays her hands on the belly of a woman heavy with child, counting the days, listening to the pulse, murmuring something under her breath. The fire watches all of this crackling steadily, throwing soft light over bodies bundled in wool and linen, casting shadows that move gently along the walls. Outside, the snow presses softly against the doors, muffling the world into stillness. And inside, every small act feels larger. Every sip of broth, every drop of oil, every whispered reassurance that the cough will pass. The swelling will fade, the fever will break. No one hopes for miracles here. They hope for sleep, for quiet nights, for warmth that holds through until morning. And in that hope, the village continues. Inhale, exhale, like the bellows feeding the fire. A spoon lifted to the mouth, a hand on a forehead, a child's breath slowing into rest. Winter may bite, but it does not conquer, not here, where every remedy is made with patience, and every act of care is a thread in the tapestry that holds the village together, beneath snow, beneath sky, beneath time. As the season reaches its quietest depth, when the sun barely lifts itself above the horizon and the world seems to move in a hush made of wood smoke and breath, the village becomes a place shaped by shadows more than light, each corner softened by flickering flame, each moment stretched long by silence. Time begins to feel less like a straight path and more like a circle, slow turning, familiar, returning again and again to the same small rituals that keep the cold outside the door and the spirit anchored within. In one cottage, a man repairs a wooden hinge by the glow of a beeswax candle, his hands moving slowly, not for lack of skill, but because there is no need to hurry. There is always time in winter, and time moves best when handled gently. The candle burns low, the wax pooling at its base like melted honey, and the light it gives off is golden and soft, casting long, slow shadows across the uneven walls. On the other side of the room, his wife winds spun wool into tight little balls, her hands deft and sure, her feet wrapped in layered cloth, tucked into straw-lined slippers, while a cat sleeps beside her, curled into a soft shape that barely seems to breathe. The room smells of soot and wool, of old bread and ash, of the smoke that weaves itself into everything during these months and stays even when the season passes. Outside, the snow has settled into its deepest silence, blanketing the thatch in smooth drifts and climbing halfway up the lower windows, softening every sound until even footsteps vanish beneath it. Only the wind still speaks, and even then it whispers more than howls, brushing around corners, slipping through door gaps, testing the strength of every shutter. The village does not resist the winter, it leans into it, folds itself into warmth like dough into cloth, and waits, not with impatience, but with the deep stillness of those who understand the turning of seasons, not as inconvenience, but as necessity. In another house, 3 generations sit near the hearth, each absorbed in small tasks. An old man carving a flute from a scrap of ash wood, a middle-aged woman stitching a patch onto a wool cloak, a boy threading wooden beads onto a length of twine. No one speaks, yet the space is full, rich with the quiet weight of being together. The shadows move across their faces slowly, drawn out by firelight that pulses gently, and above them, in the rafters, the last of the summer herbs hang in dry bunches, their leaves curled inward like sleeping fingers. Sometimes the shadows stretch across the ceiling in ways that suggest other lives, stories unspoken but sensed, a gesture here, a silhouette there, flickering images of what has been and what may come again. These are not omens, only reflections, reminders of all that has happened before and all that will return. Outside, a few figures move between homes, wrapped in layers that make them seem more shape than person, carrying pots of broth or bundles of kindling, nodding silently to one another through the frost. These are the shadow trades of winter, the quiet exchanges made not with ceremony, but with necessity and care. A handful of dried peas traded for a length of thread, a hot stone from the fire passed to warm an elder's bedding, a promise to help with the thawing roof come spring. These unspoken bargains are the true currency of winter, gentle debts repaid not in silver, but in time and touch. When night falls again, and it always feels like night is never far, it comes softly, settling into the spaces between things, wrapping the village in its long dark coat. Lamps are lit with care, placed in corners to push back just enough of the dark without disturbing its peace. Meals are modest, shared in silence or with low murmured stories, and afterward tools are tidied, wool is folded, ash is stirred. The fire is laid for the long sleep, with larger logs set to catch in the night if they can. Children are wrapped in blankets and tucked between adults, all breathing the same warm air, all drifting slowly into dreams, filled with flickering shapes and remembered voices. Above them, the roof holds strong. Outside, the snow continues to fall in soft, endless patterns, reshaping the world with every flake, while inside, the shadows stretch and curl. And the quiet work of surviving winter carries on in warmth, in patience, in peace. The snow, which had once seemed like a blanket, now feels more like a weight, a soft but pressing presence that rests upon rooftops, fences, and fields alike, bending the brittle branches of the bare-limbed trees and dulling the shapes of the world beneath a smooth, colourless hush. The paths between cottages have narrowed into troughs, carved by slow and frequent footsteps, their edges crisp with frozen ridges that catch the light of lanterns in the early morning and late afternoon, the only times when daylight even bothers to appear. Beneath this snow, life continues not with flourish, but with endurance. The village feels like something half asleep, breathing slowly beneath the drift, its heartbeat muffled and gentle. The thatch roofs groan occasionally under the shifting weight, and icicles gather like crystal teeth along the edges of eaves, dripping in tiny increments whenever the sun peeks through, only to freeze again the moment the shadows return. Inside one of the homes, a woman kneels beside a large clay jar buried deep into the ground near the hearth, removing its wool-stuffed lid to reveal thickened fat in which bits of cured meat have been stored. She scoops out 2 small chunks with a wooden spoon and sets them aside with care, knowing they must stretch across several meals. The smell is sharp but rich, familiar and slightly sweet with age. Behind her, the fire burns low and steady, and her daughter plucks feathers from a small game bird that had been caught in a snare days earlier and hung until it softened. The feathers are collected carefully, pressed flat and dry, then stored in a sack used to stuff pillows and line the inside of boots. Nothing is wasted. In another house, someone is dyeing thread with onion skins saved from the autumn's harvest, a small pot of yellowed water steaming gently on the stones near the coals. And the thread, dipped and wrung and dipped again, takes on a colour that looks like the memory of sunlight more than the thing itself. The air inside the homes is warm but heavy, thick with the smell of wool, oil, old herbs, and the long accumulation of meals and breath and burning wood. Each family's scent is its own, layered into the beams, the floorboards, the woven walls of straw and mud, a kind of human fingerprint that cannot be erased even by time. Occasionally, the roofs must be cleared and men climb carefully up, boots tied with rope, hats pulled low, axes or shovels in hand. The snow is hacked away slowly, cautiously, tossed in heavy piles that fall with muted thuds into the drifts below. The work is cold and quiet, done in pairs, with few words exchanged beyond the warning of slipping or cracking. When the work is finished, they return inside, red-cheeked and stiff, and their gloves are set on sticks to dry near the hearth, their cloaks steamed into limpness by the fire's heat. Beneath the snow, the ground sleeps. The fields lie frozen, the tools tucked away in sheds, and no plough has touched the earth in months. But the villagers do not forget what lies below. In idle moments, they run fingers across seed pouches stored high on shelves, or trace the pattern of garden beds through the frost on windows, reminding themselves that what is covered is not gone, only waiting. Sometimes they talk about the growing season, not with longing, but with certainty, as if speaking it keeps it tethered to the world, keeps spring's return from drifting too far away. A woman near the village edge keeps a sprig of dried mint in a jar beside her bed, lifting the lid now and then to breathe in its sharp scent and remember what green smells like. In the evenings, the homes grow quieter still, the dimness gathering early. A few candles burn, but most light comes from the fire, and people sit wrapped in shawls and cloaks, speaking only when the words feel necessary. One man carves a wooden fork, not because it is needed, but because his hands must keep moving. A child reads from a scrap of old parchment, lips shaping words slowly, learning not just letters, but the rhythm of a world that extends beyond the snow. And as the fire burns lower, as the wind begins to rise once more outside, brushing snow from rooftops and rustling the walls with a soft insistence, the villagers settle into their places once more, hands tucked beneath blankets, heads bowed toward warmth, their breath rising slowly, steadily, in a room wrapped in shadow and silence, and the heavy hush of a winter that is not harsh, but simply long. And underneath it all, life continues, quiet and sure. In the coldest stretch of the year, when the snow lies layered like quilts upon the rooftops, and the air outside is so still that even the smoke from chimneys rises straight into the sky before fading into the grey, the life of the village folds further inward, shrinking to fit within the narrow walls of stone and wood and wattle, where every breath fogs the air, and every footstep lands softly on floors trodden smooth by generations. Each cottage is its own world now, an island surrounded by snow and silence, and the people within move through their routines like old songs remembered without thinking, quiet refrains of comfort and function. The fire is tended before anything else, always, its coals nudged, its logs turned, its ash swept gently to one side so that it might burn clean and steady throughout the long day. Water, brought inside in buckets from the well, or melted from packed snow, sits beside the hearth in wooden pails, rimmed with ice until the fire's warmth softens it. The air is full of the faint scent of peat smoke, of damp wool drying on chairs and lines strung above, of onions hung in braided strands from the beams. Everything is a little damp, a little frayed, a little worn down by time and use, but it is all deeply familiar, and within that familiarity is safety. The cold outside is no longer a surprise but a condition, a presence known and understood, and so long as the fire burns and the roof holds, there is nothing to fear from it. In one cottage, a girl sits by the window, the hide-patched frame letting in a thin sliver of light, her breath fogging the glass as she scratches figures into the frost with a bit of stick. Circles, birds, looping shapes that melt slowly as the heat creeps upward. Her grandmother, wrapped in a shawl the colour of soot, hums softly while peeling turnips into a pot, the parings curling into the steam, while nearby a man sharpens a blade on a flat stone, his motions slow and rhythmic, the sound a quiet rasp that seems to echo gently between the walls. The baby, wrapped in linens and wool, sleeps in a cradle close to the hearth, the wooden legs rocking now and then from the foot of a brother stretched beside it. In this season, movement is slow, deliberate, measured not by urgency but by necessity. Clothes are mended with long, even stitches, cloaks patched and reinforced at the seams with bits of scrap, old linen turned into underlayers for extra warmth. The sound of spinning wheels turns softly in many homes, the hum of wool drawn out into thread, wound into skeins and stored for the coming year. Outside, no one lingers unless needed. A man may pass to check on the animals in the low-roofed barn, boots crunching into the hardened snow. Or a woman may make her way to another cottage with a jar of broth or a sack of flour clutched beneath her cloak. But most stay close to their fires, their silence broken only by the occasional exchange through a half-open door, a nod, a shared glance of understanding. Inside, stories are sometimes told, not grand or fantastical, but small real stories about winters past, about strange happenings, about who once lived in the now empty cottage near the woods. These tales are not distractions but anchors, ways of reminding each other that this has all been lived before, that the snow always melts eventually that the earth beneath it still remembers how to grow. Some evenings, the villagers sit without speaking at all, the firelight dancing on their faces, their hands folded in their laps or busy with familiar tools, and in those moments, the quiet becomes almost sacred, a blanket as warm as any fur. Shadows stretch longer across the walls, flickering with the fire's breath, and even the youngest child learns to recognize the sound of wind gathering at the corners, the creak of the beams, the whistle that slips through the tiniest cracks and curls around their feet. These are the voices of winter, old and ever present, and no one in the village expects anything else. The cold may press in through the walls, but within those walls is something stronger. The slow, patient pulse of a people who know how to endure, not with noise or fury, but with a quiet persistence woven into every corner of their homes, their habits, their breath. And so they sit, wrapped in stillness and wool and the soft light of their fires, waiting not for the end of winter, but for the next morning, the next bowl of broth, the next piece of wood to catch flame. As the snow begins to shift beneath its own weight and the nights stretch just a little less far than before, the sound of winter changes, becoming less sharp and more hollow, as if the world is breathing deeper now, creaking in its thaw. The village still lies wrapped in white, but the edges are softening, and the wind, though cold, hums a different tune as it brushes the thatched rooftops and whistles through the wooden slats of barn doors. Wood becomes the language of survival now more than ever, not only for warmth, but for the sound it makes, the comfort it gives, the way it shapes itself into tools, spoons, repairs. Each knock of axe against log is a slow heartbeat, echoing across the fields with dull certainty. In the early morning light, pale and slanted through frost-crusted panes, the men gather to split what remains of the winter's stockpile, their shoulders rising and falling in rhythm, boots dug into icy ground, hands blistered but sure. The logs crack with a satisfying thud, each split revealing the pale, dry belly of the wood, steam curling from the core as it meets the air. Beside them, boys gather kindling, careful not to slip, stuffing their arms full of twigs and bark, their breath coming in quick puffs that rise and vanish. The women inside feel the rhythm through the walls, the gentle tremor of each impact as it vibrates through the frame of the house. It is a sound that reassures, that speaks of warmth to come. And as they prepare the first meal of the day, just broth or grain porridge if they're lucky, they stir in time with it, wooden spoons moving in slow, quiet circles. A fire crackles steadily in the hearth, the logs burning down to soft orange, and the scent of smoke curls into every fold of fabric, every timber beam, every wisp of hair. In the lofts above, children sleep late under blankets patched from cloaks and sacking, their limbs tangled, their dreams heavy with the season's weight. The day unfolds gently. A man sits beside a small bench near the fire and shaves slivers from a branch to mend the handle of a tool worn thin by use. His fingers move with memory, not haste, and the shavings fall like curls of parchment into a wooden bowl. His daughter watches from across the room, threading string through a torn seam in her glove, her needle steady, her brow low in concentration. The quiet is not silence, but peace, filled with the scratch of wood, the low bubble of a pot, the occasional creak of the house adjusting to the day's cold. Outside, the snow drips steadily from eaves and branches, falling in soft thuds that leave little craters in the packed snowbanks. Chickens stir in their coops, scratching at straw, clucking low and slow. A goat bleats once and then falls quiet again, shifting its weight on the stone floor of the barn. In the distance, a raven calls, its voice flat and deep, and the sound carries as if drawn across a wide, empty space. No one answers it, but all hear it. As midday comes and goes without fanfare, the sun briefly pushes through the clouds, illuminating 1,000 tiny crystals in the snow and casting long shadows that stretch like fingers across the hard-packed paths. An old woman uses this rare light to inspect the last of the apples in the loft, turning each one gently, her thumb pressing near the stem to feel for softness. Most are wrinkled now, their skin collapsed in on itself, but they smell sweet. And she sets 3 aside to bake later. The rest return carefully to the straw. She hums a little tune as she works, no words, just the rise and fall of melody. The sort of tune that lingers in a house long after the lips fall silent. When dusk approaches once more, the logs are brought in, stacked near the hearth, and the fire is coaxed into new life, fed slowly, watched as it rises and glows. Meals are taken in low voices, bites small, bowls cradled in chilled hands. A boy falls asleep beside the fire with his cheek against the floor, the warmth painting one side of his face while the other rests in shadow. A woman finishes her stitching and winds the thread into a bundle, tucking it into a clay jar. Another day ends not with ceremony, but with the steady certainty of routine. The wind continues its slow movement across the eaves, touching every window and wall, speaking softly through the cracks, and inside, the village listens, breathes, and settles into sleep once more, beneath the sheltering sound of wood and wind. By late winter, when the cold has settled so deeply into the bones of the land that even the trees seem to hold their breath, the village waits not for warmth exactly, but for change, for some small shift in light or scent or sound that might hint at the earth remembering how to wake. The snow is no longer fresh, no longer bright. It lies in hardened, lumpy ridges along rooftops and paths, marked by days of footsteps and nights of freeze and melt and freeze again. The sky remains a wash of pale grey, but sometimes, just sometimes, it brightens, just enough to cast a golden edge across the snow or to coax a single drop of water from the tip of an icicle. These changes are not celebrated with shouts or song, but noticed quietly, tucked away like a secret. A child points to the place where snow has slid from a windowsill, leaving a dark, wet line beneath, and his mother only nods, but in that nod is recognition, and in that recognition, a flicker of hope. Inside, life continues with its soft rhythms. The last of the stored food is measured with even more care now, the root cellars picked over, baskets lighter than before. A woman runs her fingers across a row of onions, lifting each one gently, pressing at the skin to test for softness. Only the firmest are kept. The rest are peeled and simmered with dried herbs and bits of bone, coaxed into broth too thin to be hearty, but warm enough to soothe. In another cottage, a man removes the last jar of preserved cabbage from the shelf, its lid sealed with wax and linen, and sets it by the fire to thaw. He does not open it yet, just sets it there, watches the frost melt from the outside. Outside, the animals stir more often now. Chickens flap their wings against the coop walls. Goats pace in their pens, and the cow lows softly as if speaking to the world beneath the snow. The barn smells strong, of straw and fur and manure, but it is a smell that comforts. It means something lives, something endures. At the well, the ice is thinner than it was last week, and a man chips at it with his tool. listening for the hollow note that means water waits just beneath. When he draws the bucket up, he pauses, watching as a few droplets fall free and catch the light in a way they haven't for months. Inside the cottages, preparations begin, not hurried, but with intent. Cloaks are brushed clean of soot and repaired at the seams. Tools are laid out and inspected. Baskets are rewoven where they've sagged. No one speaks of spring aloud, but the work is done all the same, as if hands remember even when the mouth remains silent. The children are restless now, their games more energetic, their laughter more frequent, especially on the days when the sun finds its way into the room for more than a minute. They still press their hands to the warm stones near the hearth, still curl into sheepskins at night. But they move with a bit more bounce, as if their limbs feel the stirrings of the earth even before the soil can be seen. A girl dares to open the door for longer than needed, letting in a cold breeze sharp with the scent of damp earth. And though she is scolded, the moment lingers in the room, the air different now. Later, when the fire is fed for the evening, the wood cracks with a different kind of sound, less dry, more sappy, and the flame spits slightly as if startled by moisture. No one remarks on it, but all notice. At night, the wind no longer howls, it sighs, and that soft sigh carries with it a promise, not of sudden warmth, but of something changing, something old beginning to shift beneath the crust of winter. The village listens, not with ears alone, but with bodies and breath and instinct. They wait, wrapped in wool and flickering firelight, their fingers curled around wooden spoons, their eyes watching the shadows dance on the walls. And in that waiting, there is peace. Not the peace of rest, but the peace of readiness, of knowing that what has been endured is almost behind them, and that what comes next will be slow and wet and muddy and full of work, but it will be new. It will be green. And beneath the frozen paths, beneath the snow-packed fields, the seeds are still there, asleep and unbothered, waiting too. And then, one morning, without ceremony, the village wakes to the sound of snow shifting, not melting, not vanishing, but moving, sighing under its own weight, as if ready to step aside. The rooftops drip steadily now, and along the narrow paths between the homes, water runs in shallow rivulets, carving soft grooves through the crusted white. The air is no longer hollow. It carries a scent not of wood smoke or frozen bark, but something faint and earthy, as if the soil itself has whispered through the thaw. Children are first to notice it, stepping out into the morning chill with faces tilted skyward, watching droplets fall from icicles like slow raindrops, catching them on their tongues, giggling at the way their boots sink deeper into the softening snow. The adults follow more cautiously, blinking against the brightness, breathing in the damp. Hands reach toward the corners of fences where the barest hints of brown begin to peek through. Old straw, a leaf flattened like parchment, the tip of a root that did not bury itself deep enough. Inside the cottages, the fires still burn, but smaller now, more for comfort than survival. The walls still hold the scent of winter, of wool and ash and salt, but windows are cracked open for a moment here and there, enough to let the old air slip out and the new air drift in, cool and unfamiliar. Meals become simpler, not by need but by instinct. Broths are thinner, the herbs used more generously, their fragrance filling the rooms in soft, surprising ways. Someone laughs just a little louder. Someone sings as they hang a cloak to dry. The animals, too, feel it. A goat paws at the half-melted ground. Chickens flutter with new energy, pecking at the corners of their coop, as though searching for the green they only remember. The village dog, lazy all winter, now trots along the edge of the path with its nose pressed into the thawing earth, tail high, ears alert. And beneath it all, the people begin to emerge, not just from their homes, but from the quiet hush of waiting. Neighbours speak more now, not in murmurs by the fire, but in full voices out in the pale light, calling across the lane, offering help with tools, trading eggs for flour, news for news. A man clears the roof of a neighbour's house. A child offers a peeled willow switch as a gift. A woman pulls the first bucket of clean, unfrozen water from the well and lifts it with a small, victorious smile. The ground is still hard beneath the slush, and there is work ahead. Repairs to be made, fences to be mended, gardens to be turned once they soften. But there is no hurry. Spring will not arrive with banners or sunbursts. It will come slowly, just as the winter came, and the people will meet it the same way, with quiet preparation, with measured steps, with the same steady care that carried them through the cold. And when the last of the snow slides from the eaves, when the first crocus pushes through the thawed earth like a whisper, they will not cheer, but nod, as if to an old friend returning after a long, silent absence. For they know the cold may come again, and that even warmth must be carried carefully, sheltered as they have sheltered fire and hope all through the season. But for now, in this moment, the village exhales. The light has changed. The wind carries promise. And somewhere beneath the still damp ground, the roots begin to stir. Thank you for walking slowly with us through the quiet heart of winter. Sleep now, knowing the fire is still burning, the snow is still soft, and tomorrow will come, just as it always has. Good night, gentle dreamer.